Welcome back, explorers. Okay, today's adventure is absolutely wild, and I've been so excited to share this with you. We're visiting an abandoned town that most people have never even heard of, but it played this crucial role in one of the most significant periods of American history. I'm talking about the atomic age, the Cold War, and the race to build nuclear weapons. Sounds intense, right? But here's the fascinating part. This was also just a regular American town where families lived, kids went to school, and neighbors barbecued together on weekends. So buckle up, because this story is unlike anything we've explored before. Today we're heading to Hanford, Washington, or more specifically, the abandoned town that served workers at the Hanford Nuclear Reservation. This place produced the plutonium for the atomic bomb dropped on Nagasaki in 1945, and then continued producing nuclear materials throughout the Cold War. But before Hanford became a top-secret nuclear site, it was actually 3 small farming communities: Hanford, White Bluffs, and Richland. In 1943, the federal government gave residents just 30 days to leave their homes, farms, and businesses. Can you even imagine? 30 days to abandon everything you'd built. Let me set the scene for you. It's March 1943, and the United States is fully committed to winning World War II. The Manhattan Project, the secret program to develop atomic weapons, needs a location for plutonium production. They needed somewhere remote, with access to lots of water for cooling reactors, and with plenty of empty space for safety reasons. The Columbia River Valley in south-central Washington checked all those boxes. So federal agents showed up at farms and businesses, offered prices that weren't negotiable, and told people they had to leave immediately for national security reasons. Here's what really gets me about this story. Most of these families had no idea why they were being displaced. The Manhattan Project was so secret that even the people being forced to leave couldn't be told the real reason. They were just told it was for the war effort, and they needed to go. Imagine packing up your entire life in 30 days without even understanding why. Some families had lived in these communities for generations. They had buried relatives in local cemeteries, built businesses, raised children there, and suddenly, it all had to end. The construction that followed was absolutely massive. At its peak, the Hanford site employed over 50,000 workers, building 9 nuclear reactors along the Columbia River. These weren't small operations. We're talking about massive industrial facilities, processing nuclear materials for weapons production. The workers lived in quickly constructed housing that looked like a mix between military barracks and summer camp cabins. It was rough living, but everyone knew they were part of something important, even if they didn't know exactly what. Walking through what's left of the original towns today is this really eerie experience. The foundations of homes are still visible, you can see where streets ran through the communities, and there are fruit trees, now massive and gnarled, that were planted by farming families decades ago. These trees are still producing fruit. Can you imagine? The families are long gone, their homes demolished, but their apple and cherry trees keep growing year after year. There's something both beautiful and sad about that. The tour program at Hanford is actually really comprehensive, and I was impressed by how transparent they are about both the historical significance and the environmental challenges. You can tour the B Reactor, the world's first full-scale plutonium production reactor, which is absolutely fascinating from an engineering and historical perspective. They've preserved it as a National Historic Landmark, and standing inside this facility that literally changed world history gives you chills. But here's where the story gets complicated, and I think it's really important we talk about this honestly. The environmental legacy of nuclear weapons production at Hanford is significant. That's putting it mildly. For decades, radioactive waste was stored in underground tanks, some of which have leaked. The Columbia River, which provided cooling water for the reactors, received radioactive discharge. The groundwater beneath the site is contaminated in many areas. The cleanup effort is ongoing and will continue for decades, costing billions of dollars. The workers who built and operated these facilities faced health risks they often didn't fully understand at the time. Radiation exposure, chemical contamination, and hazardous working conditions affected many workers' health. Some developed cancers and other illnesses years or decades later. The government has acknowledged these impacts and established compensation programs, but for many affected families, it came too late. This is the hidden cost of nuclear weapons production that we're still grappling with. Now, I want to be clear about something. Visiting Hanford is completely safe for tourists. The tour areas have been thoroughly assessed and monitored. You're exposed to less radiation during a Hanford tour than you'd receive during a cross-country flight. The public tours only visit areas that meet all safety standards, but the site is massive, over 500 square miles, and much of it remains restricted due to ongoing cleanup operations. What really fascinates me about Hanford is how it represents this collision between cutting-edge science and everyday American life. Scientists working on nuclear physics shared a town with construction workers, engineers, secretaries, cooks, and maintenance staff. Everyone from Nobel Prize winners to recent high school graduates lived side by side in this instant city built for one purpose. The community that developed there was unique in American history. The secrecy surrounding the Manhattan Project created its own strange culture. Workers couldn't tell their families what they did all day. Security was incredibly tight. There were checkpoints everywhere, armed guards, constant surveillance. People lived with these enormous secrets, knowing their work was crucial, but not being able to share that weight with anyone. After the atomic bombs were dropped and the Manhattan Project was revealed, Hanford workers finally understood why all that secrecy had been necessary. Let me tell you about the Reactor tour specifically, because it's really the centerpiece of the Hanford historical experience. You'll see the control room where operators monitored the reactor, the face where uranium fuel was loaded, and the spaces where plutonium was extracted. The guides do an excellent job explaining the science in accessible ways, while also discussing the historical context and the ethical questions surrounding nuclear weapons. It's fascinating and thought-provoking in equal measure. The tours run seasonally from April through October, and here's a really important detail. You must book in advance. The tours are free, which is amazing, but they fill up quickly, especially during summer. You'll need to provide identification at security checkpoints, and there are age restrictions for some tour areas. The full tour takes about 4 hours and involves a fair amount of walking, so wear comfortable shoes and bring water. One aspect of Hanford that doesn't get enough attention is how it shaped the entire region's development. Richland, the nearby city that grew to support Hanford workers, transformed from a village of a few hundred people to a city of tens of thousands almost overnight. The economic impact was enormous. Jobs, infrastructure, schools, hospitals, all built to support the nuclear reservation. When operations scaled back after the Cold War ended, the entire region had to figure out how to transition to a post-nuclear economy. The original displaced communities, Hanford, White Bluffs, and the original Richland, are mostly gone now. A few buildings remain, protected as historic sites, and there's a small museum preserving artifacts and stories from the pre-Manhattan Project era. Walking through these remnants, you can still feel the presence of the families who live there. It's this powerful reminder that national security decisions have very personal, very human consequences. Here's something I find really meaningful about preserving sites like Hanford. They help us have honest conversations about complex history. Nuclear weapons probably shortened World War II and saved lives by avoiding a mainland invasion of Japan. But they also ushered in an era where humanity has the capacity to destroy itself. The families displaced from Hanford sacrificed their homes for the war effort. The workers who built and operated the facilities took on health risks for their country. The environmental damage will take generations to remediate. All of these truths can exist simultaneously. The Cold War-era production at Hanford continued for decades after World War II ended. Additional reactors were built, processing facilities expanded, and thousands more workers were employed in nuclear materials production. This wasn't just a brief wartime emergency measure. This was a sustained industrial operation that lasted nearly 50 years. The site represents America's entire nuclear age, from the atomic bombs of World War II through the massive nuclear arsenals of the Cold War. What I really appreciate about how Hanford handles its public education mission is the balance between honoring the workers' contributions and acknowledging the environmental and health consequences of nuclear weapons production. They don't shy away from the difficult questions or uncomfortable truths. The tours and exhibits present multiple perspectives, helping visitors develop their own informed opinions about nuclear energy and weapons. For anyone interested in Cold War history, nuclear science, or industrial heritage, Hanford is an absolutely must-visit site. The B reactor alone is worth the trip. It's the only Manhattan Project reactor open to the public, and the historical significance is just incredible. But the full experience, understanding the displaced communities, the worker experiences, the environmental legacy, and the ongoing cleanup efforts, provides this comprehensive education about a crucial chapter of American history. Before we wrap up, I want to mention that there are actually several other Manhattan Project sites you can visit across the country. Los Alamos in New Mexico, Oak Ridge in Tennessee, and Hanford here in Washington make up the Manhattan Project National Historical Park. Each site tells a different part of the story, and visiting all three would give you an incredibly complete picture of this massive undertaking. In the description below, I've linked to the official Hanford tour booking site. Seriously, book early because these fill up, along with some excellent books and documentaries about the Manhattan Project and the Cold War nuclear arms race. I've also included information about the other Manhattan Project sites and some resources about nuclear history and science if you want to dive deeper into these topics. So here's what I want to know from you. How do you think we should remember and commemorate complex histories like Hanford? What's the right balance between honoring the people who contributed and acknowledging the consequences of these programs? This is such an important conversation, and I'd love to hear your thoughtful perspectives in the comments below. And listen, if you're enjoying these Saturday deep dives into America's most unique, abandoned, and historical sites, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. We've got so many more incredible places to explore together. Next week, we're heading inside the massive shipyard where America's Navy was born, and trust me, the scale of that place will blow your mind. Also, don't forget we've got new content every Tuesday with accessible abandoned exploration tips, and Fridays with these longer historical deep dives. It's a whole week of exploration adventures, and I'm so glad you're here exploring with me. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep exploring with respect for the complicated, fascinating history that shaped our world. This is Peregrine Pathways, reminding you that every place has a story, and some of those stories are more complex and important than we ever imagined. See you next week, explorers.